Be sure to share your sound, Jake, or unmute.
Thank you for joining us today to celebrate Veterans Day, to learn about and support the work of Inner City Law Center. My name is Adam Murray. I have the privilege, the honor of being the Chief Executive Officer at Inner City Law Center. Inner City Law Center's Homeless Veterans Project has been providing free legal representation to the too many veterans living in our shelters and on our streets since 1998. It is shameful, it is completely unacceptable that we have 4,000 veterans each night living on the streets and in the shelters in Los Angeles. Inner City Law Center is committed to ending this travesty. In the past 4 years, we have recovered over $9.5 million in retroactive awards and over $7.9 million in increased monthly benefits for our homeless veteran clients. This work is only possible because of the generosity of our supporters, both the financial supporters who give to the organization and also the many lawyers who come and volunteer with us to supplement the work that our staff does and to support our clients. Thank you for being here with us today. Thank you for your support of Inner City Law Center. And thank you for keeping the attention on the incredibly critical and important issue of veteran homelessness.
It's scary, nerve-wracking, because we were brought into Saudi Arabia in the middle of the night in complete secrecy. We were loaded into buses where the windows were covered. We couldn't even see out ourselves. When one of our staff sergeants stepped in an IED, we had to evac him out of there, and President Bush even flew out to hand deliver his Purple Heart. There was nobody here with signs saying, "Welcome home." I thought about taking my life.
The VA system, as my husband mentioned, is very broken. The one thing I stressed to my husband and to Liz, he was not going to be a statistic.
What veterans need, what Izzy needed, was someone who knew how the VA system works and to help navigate that system with them. They were not adequately compensating him because they did not understand the actual functional impairments that he was experiencing.
I look at my boys and I'm like, wow, I could feed you.
Combat diving in, and what they do is they fly in a certain grid and then grid area, and then they just drop thousands of feet. Your stomach goes into your throat.
During one of these high-risk jumps in Afghanistan, Adam encountered high winds and slammed into a flat rock. He suffered serious head and orthopedic injuries.
I was avoiding it, I think, more or less. I mean, I didn't know to get help, or thought I was better than it. I had no clue. While I was living in my truck, then I came across Volunteers of America, Hollywood Veterans Center, and I moved in there. And that had helped me focus medically.
The VA repeatedly refused to grant Mr. Volchok full disability status.
You got to fill out everything yourself. And I was in such confusion and chaos. I couldn't understand. There's no way any guy coming out of the military would be able to sit there and with organized thoughts, unless they were clear-minded, without any distractions.
ICLC attorney Kara Mahoney filed an appeal. 20 months later, the VA agreed that Mr. Volchok is 100% disabled because of his service.
It has relieved a lot of mental stress. I get to now focus on physical activities to make myself better.
Mr. Volchok received more than $83,000 in back benefits and will receive $3,300 a month for the rest of his life.
My dog Spook, he makes you smile and laugh just by playing with him with a laser.
Adam brings Spook to a legal clinic at ICLC called Wolf Wednesdays.
I'm very grateful and thankful for Inner City Law Center's help to help me get my life straight. They gave me an opportunity that not many people get.
Greetings, I am Erin Thompson, and welcome to Inner City Law Center's Weekend to End Homelessness with the focus on our veterans. and happy Veterans Day. This event will provide information for veterans with less than honorable discharge statuses on how to access VA benefits and health care. A discussion will follow regarding the official policies of development at the VA West LA campus and ongoing infrastructure and services advocacy aimed at meeting all of our veterans' unique housing needs. 2 other events will follow tomorrow, as well as an advocacy campaign, which you'll learn about more from one of our featured speakers today, Dionne Turner. Before we get started, just a little bit of housekeeping. We are on a Zoom webinar, and there is an opportunity for you to ask questions through the Q&A function or through the chat. We'll be paying attention to the questions and answers, and near the end of the presentation, there will be a specific time to address those questions. We encourage you to ask questions. This is the time where you have experts here who can address your needs. You may even be asked to unmute to clarify your question, so look out for that feature as well. Also, keep in mind, Inner City Law Center has social media pages. We have a newsletter, and we'll have contact information at the end of each of the presentations where we can host any necessary follow-up conversations. We are more than happy to hear from you. There will be a recording available. This is being recorded, after which we'll provide to you through the email that you use to register. Now I will turn it over to Amanda Powell. She is a staff attorney here at Inner City Law Center, and we will drop a full bio in the chat for you to review about her. Amanda, thank you for leading this training for our veterans. We appreciate you. Please go ahead and introduce yourself.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Amanda Powell, and I am a staff attorney on the Homeless Veterans Project at Inner City Law Center. I have been with Inner City it'll be 4 years in January, and I have spent the entire time working specifically with VA benefits and doing this work. So I'm really excited to kind of share everything that everything we work on, and hopefully help guide folks through what is an overly complicated process and very difficult. And so I'm going to try to break it down as much as possible. And I just encourage, ask as many questions as you have. The goal here is to provide you with the information that you need. So feel free to ask as many questions, and we'll try to get through all of them and explain a somewhat complicated issue in the clearest way possible. Let's see, so I'm going to share. Okay, so specifically today, we're going to talk about filing VA benefits claims if you have a less than honorable discharge. So a lot of the information that you get is more geared to veterans who have an honorable discharge and are immediately eligible to just apply for service-connected disability benefits, pension. And so today we're going to focus on the population of veterans who have less than an honorable discharge and kind of have to go through an extra process in order to become eligible. And so just an overview of what we're going to talk about today. I'm going to do a little brief segment about our team. Then we're going to move on to filing for VA benefits with less than honorable discharges. We're going to talk about the COD process, and I'll explain that more. Applying for healthcare and applying for service-connected disability compensation benefits. We're going to go over the most important VA forms that you're going to need and what supporting documents that you're going to want to file with your claim. We're going to touch very briefly on appeals as well. Oftentimes, unfortunately, these cases do need to go on appeal, and we'll discuss why it's worth appealing. So the Homeless Veterans Project, we are located on Skid Row. We are a team of 12. We're a fairly large team. Historically, it has never been that large, but it's really great because we get to bounce ideas off each other and brainstorm. Just when you think you've kind of handled all the issues, something comes out of left field, and we have a large team with some experts that can help kind of determine what next steps we should take, how to better attack the VA system. And in part, not only do we do a lot of individual representation, but we try often to work with the local VA regional office to just improve the way that they process claims, the way that they're working with veterans, and how they're moving forward with especially COD claims, because they're a little bit more complicated and complex. And so our expertise in particular are working with a lot of folks who've experienced chronic homelessness, who have mental and physical disabilities, and often a lot of our clients do have less than honorable discharges. So it is something that we are very familiar with and we do on a day-to-day basis. And so first, we're going to talk about who the veteran decides who the VA decides is a veteran versus us. So whenever I use the term veteran, I'm referring to anyone who has served. If you served in any of the armed forces, when I use the word veteran, that's who I'm referring to. So that's who this presentation is geared for. It's for anyone who has served in any of the armed forces. Unfortunately, the VA does have criteria that you have to meet in order to be considered a veteran for VA purposes. And that is important because if you are a veteran for VA purposes, then you are eligible for things like VASH, for service-connected disability benefits, and for healthcare. And so we're going to talk about the two things that you need to show the VA in order to be considered a veteran for their purposes. First, they're going to look at active military service, and then they're going to look at your discharge status. And those two things together are what is the equation in order to determine whether you're eligible. And so first, addressing active military service. So when we're talking about active military service, we're talking about active duty, whether you were enlisted or activated from the National Guard or reserves. That's what we're talking about when we're talking about active military service. And so if you served pre-September 1980, there is no length of service requirement. So if you served at all in active duty service pre-1980, you're going to meet that first requirement without anything more needing to happen. Now, if you served post-September 1980, the VA does require 24 months of active duty service or medical discharge or a service-connected disability. So again, post-1980, you're going to have 2 years of active service in order to show up to the VA and say, I want healthcare or a medical discharge or eligibility through a service-connected disability. And I'm going to try to just keep an eye on the chat. If you have questions as they come up, I'm just going to monitor the chat and try to answer those as I notice them. So the next thing that the VA looks at is your discharge status. And so this is your discharge status as listed on your DD 214. So if you're in this green area, you're going to be good to go to just file for benefits. You're honorable for VA purposes. You're eligible for, VASH. You're eligible for healthcare. You're not going to have to do anything further to show up and be eligible as far as your discharge status goes. If you are in this gray area, this is what we, determine as like a less than honorable discharge status. You might be other than honorable or bad conduct discharge, and you are still potentially eligible for benefits. And that's really important because there's a lot of misinformation that goes around, sometimes from the VA itself. And so it's important to know that even you may have been told that you aren't eligible because of your discharge status, but that is not true. There is a primary evaluation that has to happen, but it is something that you have a right to. And so that's important to know, that you always have the right to apply for eligibility. And then in discussing the dishonorable discharge, I've personally have never seen that in the 4 years. It often does get confused with maybe veterans who have applied for benefits with a less than honorable discharge. And if they've applied for benefits, they might have gotten a letter from the VA that says you are dishonorable for VA purposes. That does not mean that you have a dishonorable discharge. It's a very important thing to note, because a lot of veterans will come in and say, I have a dishonorable discharge. That's a very different, we're looking just the DD 214 here. So if the VA sends you a letter that says you're dishonorable for VA purposes, what that means is they probably did a character of service determination. And maybe you didn't understand that process, you didn't know what that is, but that's what they were doing. They were determining whether you're eligible, and they deemed that you were dishonorable for VA purposes. And so in that process is determining the VA eligibility. This is the COD process. COD is character of discharge. So basically, you know, you're going to get your discharge and the DOD is going to characterize it as honorable, other than honorable, general, bad conduct. The VA is also going to characterize your discharge. So this is where you kind of get an option to see if you're eligible for benefits without filing for a discharge upgrade through the Department of Defense. So here, this is the threshold that the VA is going to look at in determining if, despite maybe your less than honorable discharge, if you're still eligible for benefits. And so you are entitled to that determination. So it's important if someone says that you're not, that you insist on filing a claim. And we're going to talk about that process a little bit later on, but just know that it is your right to have this eligibility determination. And so it's important to know what the VA does consider when they're trying to make this determination. They consider a number of things, length of service, and I'm going to provide a lot of examples along the way for different like options of how to apply things to point on when you are applying. So length of service is you know, an important one. Say you were enlisted for 4 years and you did 3.5 years of honorable service. You had great marks. You maybe got promoted and, you know, went up the ranks, and then something happened. Maybe you encountered a stressful moment in your life. Maybe someone passed away and engaged in some misconduct. At that point, you know, you do have 3.5 years of service, of honorable service, and it's important to point to that. So the VA is supposed to look at these things on their own, but they don't always. So it's really important that you point out this and make it very clear to them that why you are eligible. So address length of service. If it benefits you, address it. Accomplishments, again, point to if you've been deployed, if you do have accolades, if you have great performance evals or letters of rec, things like that, any promotions, point to that, right? Because a lot of times what I'll see in records is that a lot of the good things that have happened during a veteran's time in service far outweigh whatever, you know, the incident of misconduct is and the reason for their discharge. So point to that. And I know this is kind of where it gets a little tough because it's hard to address kind of this misconduct head on. Sometimes it might be something that you want to try to avoid or work around, but for this purpose, it's very important that you address it. You know, they are going to look at the type of misconduct. So, you know, if it is, say, an incident of using marijuana, that they're going to evaluate that compared to something, you know, if you were injuring someone else, like they are going to weigh different misconducts differently. Also, you want to address the frequency of misconduct. So if it was one, that's something you're going to want to point out. And we're going to talk a little bit more specifically why that's important in a couple slides down, but you want to, if it's very minimal, you want to address that. And most importantly, you want to address any mitigating circumstances that exist around the misconduct. And so we're going to talk more specifically about what mitigating circumstances are. And hold on, I apologize. My dog is snoring in the background. Okay, we're back.
We do have a question in the chat, Amanda.
We do? I must have missed it. Okay.
For the gray area,
do you still have to have a minimum of 2 years of service? Let's go back. So you're talking about in this area. So the answer is yes, but the other thing to know is it's not only just the 2 years of service, but there are those other exceptions, which is a medical discharge or service-connected disability. And so I will say that almost always, if you are applying for a COD determination, you probably are applying and are going to qualify for service-connected disability benefits. So even if you don't have that 2 years of service, you may fall under, a medical discharge or service-connected disability. And we're going to talk more about in the process of filing what that means and how you're going to use that and couple it with the COD process to become eligible for benefits. So, and it might not make sense now. Feel free to follow up on that question when we get to that point if it's still unclear. So mitigating circumstances. Some things you're going to want to address. And again, this is, you need to address it directly to the VA. It's really important. I think a lot of veterans, when they apply for these, especially for character of discharge determination or COD, they file a claim and all they do is just write, COD and just leave it to the VA to interpret what they believe happened. And more often than not, that it's just not going to result in a grant. It is really important that you include your own statement, that you include, and we're going to talk about what that looks like, but it's really important that you include more than just the application for filing. You really don't want to just leave this in the VA's hand to interpret your time in service and what you were going through. So, if you were experiencing mitigating circumstances, if there are mitigating circumstances, you're going to want to address them and if possible, relate them directly to whatever the misconduct might have been that led to your discharge. I will say that almost always with my clients, whatever the misconduct is, whatever it is that led to a less than honorable discharge, it is almost always directly related to a mental health issue or to a traumatic event or something else going on in their life. So it's really important to explain that and really humanize your application. So that's what you want to do. If whatever is going on, and a lot of veterans think it has to be specifically military related, mitigating circumstances might not have to do with your military service. It might have to do with your personal life. It might have to do with a loss of a loved one, or I've had a client whose brother got extremely sick and he wasn't able to visit him, and that took a major toll on him. And it's important to include that in the narrative. The VA is not going to know that otherwise. So it's really important that you are as honest and open as possible about what was going on during your military service. From the minute you enter to the minute you exit, that is all fair game. So anything that happens to you in your personal life, in your military life, in your family, anything, that's all fair game, and you can discuss it and you can use it as a basis for a mitigating circumstance to your discharge. And we're going to talk about more specific examples, but say, you're in the service, you're enlisted for 4 years, you've done 2 years, things are going okay. And then you start experiencing sexual harassment. You feel uncomfortable, right? You don't feel safe, but you also don't feel like you can say anything about it. You can go to anyone. That's very common, unfortunately, in that environment. And maybe you might avoid a certain drill sergeant. You might not show up. You might be listed as, AWOL because you didn't want to show up to drill because he made you very uncomfortable. Those are things that the VA isn't going to know unless you tell them. And it's important to address because you might have an AWOL on your record, and it really is based on something on your safety, on you trying to protect yourself. And so it's important to kind of address anything that you believe led to an incident of misconduct. And again, in talking about this, say I've had veterans who were in a car accident, a pretty severe car accident. And, after that, it really affected them. They started to feel symptoms of PTSD and started to just degrade a little bit in their work performance, maybe use marijuana to help self-medicate, even things like that, you're going to want to talk about.
There's another question in the chat.
Question about the verbiage. Shouldn't these conditions be referred to as exacerbating versus mitigating circumstances? I'm not sure. The VA specifically addresses them as mitigating circumstances. There is no language that I'm aware of in the VA about exacerbating circumstances. They're just going to ask, are there any mitigating circumstances to your discharge status, or that they should consider in granting your eligibility for benefits. Seems like the perspective is on mitigating punishment rather than validating experiences. I think the VA doesn't do a great job at validating experiences. So that is something, and there is a lot of stigma surrounding less than honorable discharge status. A lot of people have strong opinions about that, but the fact is that they are eligible for this determination. They are potentially eligible for benefits, and that is a right that they have. And, it's something that needs to be exercised more. And the VA honestly needs to do a much better job at handling these specific cases. Okay. These are kind of a little bit nuanced, but these are two other arguments that you can make when you're applying for a COD. I think that these arguments are especially helpful for folks who have applied maybe and have already received a denial, have already received a decision that says you are dishonorable for VA purposes. These are two arguments that can be made, and I think it's important because the VA might not address them head on unless you raise them. So if, first, if the misconduct was not willful or persistent. So if you had this, there's kind of two incidents that are most clearly fall under this. If it's just one incident of misconduct, say there's veterans who are discharged for one use of marijuana, that is clearly, there's an argument it is not willful or persistent, right? Something else that happens a lot is that you might have two instances of misconduct that arise out of the same event. So that's something you're going to want to address. For example, I've had clients who have overlapping like positive drug tests. So if there is, for example, I'll have a client who they'll say from January 1st to January 30th, you tested positive for marijuana. And then they'll say, here's a second incident from January 15th to February 15th, you tested positive for marijuana, right? That's problematic because that's potentially two incidents arising out of the same event. So a lot of times they'll tack on multiple things to one incident, to one true incident of misconduct. And so if you think there's one incident or one event and they kind of broke it down into two separate incidents, you're going to want to address that and make the argument that it's not a willful and persistent misconduct. And the second one is the issue of insanity. And so this one gets a little complicated and the VA handles it wrong almost so often. But it is important because the term insanity with the VA is not what we use in layman's terms. It's not, the criminal definition of insanity. It is a much lower standard. And so basically, if you deviated from your normal behavior because you were dealing with mental health issues, there's an argument that you can claim insanity, and you must be able to show a change in behavior. And what this would look like when you're filing, you could simply just write, I raised the issue of insanity, and you can explain what was going on, right? If your misconduct is for going AWOL because you were trying to be away from an abuser, right? And up to that point, you have showed up, you have done everything that you're supposed to do. And then all of a sudden you stop showing up to a certain event or a certain required thing. Maybe you can point to this deviation was caused because I was assaulted and I was dealing with a mental health issue. And so this is important, and not a lot of veterans will raise this on their own. I've actually never seen a veteran raise it on their own. But if you believe that you have a mental health issue that's related to service, it is definitely worth just raising this issue and saying, I believe that this misconduct happened because I was struggling with mental health issues. And so before we get into what it looks like to file and how to file and what to include, we're going to talk about the important VA forms. So the VA is, a system in which if it's not on their form, they're not going to read it. So it's important to know, to use their forms throughout this process. These are the most important forms. So the 1010EZ, that's your application for VA healthcare. So if you go, a lot of veterans, obviously it's a lot closer to go to a VA healthcare center as opposed to the federal building. So if you go there, you can ask for an application for VA healthcare or a 1010EZ. There is the intent to file, and this is important because maybe you're not ready to file a claim yet, but you're going to. And really what our goal is, we want you to have the earliest effective date because that's when all of your benefits go back to. So say you want to file for a claim, you're either emotionally not ready, you need time to put everything together. The very least you want to do is file this intent to file, and then you can mark that you're going to file for compensation. What that does is it preserves a year for you to finalize everything you want and submit a claim. So from the date that you submit that intent to file, you have 1 year to then finalize and submit a claim. And at that point, if that claim is granted, your benefits will go back all the way to the intent to file. And so in that earlier video, when you saw that, the veteran received a lump sum of like $83,000, that is likely because, an intent to file was there. And so there's a lump sum of benefits that are going to go back to a date, maybe even before you actually file the claim. So if you're even considering filing a claim, submit the intent to file. And then finally, the actually filing a claim. So when the time comes and you're ready to actually start the process of filing a claim, you're going to want to use the VA form 21526EZ if you've never filed before. If it's your first time, that's the form that you're going to need. It's much longer. So you're going to have to go through and fill it out, but that is the form that you are going to use when it comes time to submit it. If you have previously filed for a claim, but you would still like to refile for those benefits, you would like the VA to reconsider your claim, you're going to want to file the 20-0995. And so again, say you've previously applied for PTSD and it was denied. And that was 5 years ago. And a lot has happened since then. You started talking to a therapist, you have recently been diagnosed. You think it's time to apply again. You're gonna file the 20-0995 because you have already filed a claim for that benefit. And so the VA, again, they require their own forms down to the T. So the 4138, 21-4138 is the VA's version of blank piece of paper. It's just open space for you to write what you want. And typically what we do with that, because there is a limited amount of space, we will say, please see attached statement, please see attached supporting documents. If whatever you're saying is you think it's going to be too long to fit on that form, go ahead and write it in a Word document and attach it, or you can handwrite it as well. And you can just attach it to that 4138 if that's easier. And then there are special forms that need to be used if you are applying for PTSD. And so there's two different forms, and I apologize, there is a typo on here, but so the first one is the 21-0781, and that is if you are claiming PTSD due to your military service. So if it's combat related, if it's deployment related, you're going to want to do it on the 0781. And the second form, this should be 21-0781A. So it's just add the A to the end. And basically that is if you're claiming for PTSD due to a personal assault. So that might be sexual harassment, sexual assault, even, anything like that, anything that's personally related, even if you were to get jumped or something basically non-military related, it's going to go on that 0781A form. And the VA does have a duty to assist. So if you do this process and you file a 526EZ, you forget to include, that specific form, the 0781 or 0781A, the VA does have a duty to notify you that you need to send this form. And so they should send you a copy. They should tell you to fill this out and send it back in. But obviously it's always best to not rely on the VA if you don't have to. So let's see, are the forms on the internet? Yes, so you can, all of these forms are PDF fillable on the internet. You can Google them, you could go to the VA's website and they will list them out and kind of guide you to them. I usually just search the actual title on the internet and download it. Let's see, is there another question? Is the 4138 for lay statements, or do those go on different forms? Either way. So any lay statement, you can put it on the 4138. Like I said, you can type it up on a Word document and just attach it and say, please see attached statement, support letters, really anything you want the VA to know can go on the 4138. But a lot of times there's just limited space. So you can always attach documents to that form and submit it in that way. Let's see, that's all questions. Now we're going to start talking about the ways to actually file. And so, as I said, with the 1010EZ, for a lot of veterans, the healthcare centers are much closer. And so you should be able to go into a VA healthcare facility, ask them for a 1010EZ form. Unfortunately, oftentimes they will send you away. Like if you go to the front desk and ask, that you want to apply for healthcare eligibility, they may say you don't qualify. Again, it's not true. You have a right to at least for the VA to determine your eligibility. You should not be turned away just from your discharge status. So let them know, hey, I have the right to it. Just apply for eligibility. If they try to turn you away, fill out that 1010EZ form. And the second option, I think there's another question. Are all the forms online? Yes, all of the forms are online. Now, if you're filing a COD claim through the VBA, so the VA is broken down between VHA, which is the healthcare system, and the VBA, which is the benefit system. And so you can also apply, you can file a character of discharge determination claim through the VBA. And oftentimes this is what a lot of veterans are going to do because they are interested in, VA benefits, or even because they've been turned away wrongfully at the healthcare center and just aren't able to get that through. There is, a backup. You can, if you're just trying to get VA healthcare, you can file a COD claim on that 526EZ. Make sure you write character of service determination. And if you're just interested in healthcare, you're not trying to get benefits, just also write VA healthcare. So they know that why they're doing the determination. But most folks who do have CODs and are trying to get eligible for benefits also a lot of times qualify for VA benefits in terms of the compensation, service-connected disability benefits, VASH, other things like that. So that's kind of the next step that we're going to focus on, is applying for those. So if you are interested in service-connected disability benefits, the first thing you're going to want to do is submit an SF-180 form. And this form, again, you can find this online. This is the form to request your military records. And I recommend this because, again, you don't need to. You could just file a claim with the VA. The VA has the duty to assist. They may go through your records, but they also may miss some things, or they may not have, they may not interpret things the way that you would. There also might be things that you don't even remember that are in your records that can help your claim. So it really is important to get a copy of your own records, to go through your records and, determine which ones you actually want to draw attention to. And it can help you with when you're writing your statements. A lot of these things happened a long time ago. or have trauma surrounding them, and that can affect your ability to remember things clearly. So going through your military records can really help you remember everything that was going on in that time. Let's see, I think there's another question. We have seen more timely responses from SF-180s. So some things to know: because of COVID, there is a delay in receiving those records. If you have already filed, then the VA will have custody of those records. But right now, because of COVID, there is a delay in receiving those records, not only for yourself, but also the VA will also put in a request when you file a claim. And so there's a delay in them receiving those records as well. And again, that's why the intent to file is so important. While you're waiting for those records, you're going to file that intent to file. That way you're not losing out on any potential benefits while you're waiting for those records. And so again, if that claim is granted, it's going to go back to the date of the intent to file, even if it takes you 6 months to actually file a claim, and then 6 months for the VA to make a decision. If it's granted, you're going to get a year of back pay, and then moving forward, get your monthly amount. And so it's just very important to know what's in your records. Again, the VA does have a duty to assist, and in theory, they're going to go through your records, but it's always better to not fully rely on them to make the right decision. And so when we're talking about VA service-connected disability benefits, it can go hand in hand with the COD determination, right? A lot of times these things are connected. And so when you file for a COD, maybe it's because there was something going on in service, right? Those mitigating circumstances, you were dealing with mental health, something happened to you in service. And so these things are oftentimes very connected. This is especially true because, oftentimes what we do in our work is we actually point to the misconduct as proof, as evidence of a mental health condition, or of, proof that something happened. For example, if you're filing for PTSD, the VA will, look for markers. Misconduct almost always in PTSD cases are markers. So, if you started self-medicating, if you started avoiding things, if you started having exemplary service, right? If say you experienced a sexual assault, and now you're doing everything you can to not think about that, and you put everything you have into work, and you're just, all of a sudden you just get this exemplary marks, even though you were always average. A lot of people don't understand that too is a marker, right? You want to show a change. And so, but more specifically, misconduct, more often than not, can be used as for the, to show that something happened in service. So we're going to talk about, the 3 things you have to show in order to become eligible for disability compensation, and how the COD can tie into that, or how the misconduct can tie into that. So for prong 1, the first thing you want to show is that something happened in service. Whatever condition it is that you have is service related, something happened in service. And so this might be any trauma in service, so it could be sexual trauma, it could be sexual harassment, fear of severe injury or death. That might be military or non-military. Again, you might have gotten jumped. You might have been, in a situation in which you were uncomfortable and afraid, and it has nothing to do with the military. So again, just a reminder, everything that happens during your time in service is fair game when it comes to a qualifying incident or injury. Another, really big one that I think the VA is maybe starting to recognize and do a better job. I say better, but there's still ways to go, but that is race-based trauma. The military culture oftentimes has had very underlying race-based issues, discrimination, and a lot of our clients have experienced very severe race-based trauma, very severe discrimination, violence, and that is something that would qualify you. You could file for PTSD due to race-based trauma. And so it's important to know that if you believe that had a huge impact, that's something you're going to want to, potentially file for. And then obviously physical trauma, which would be a TBI or, physical injuries if you get into a car accident or something like that. And again, even though maybe it's not military related, it's something that may have led to your misconduct, right? If you had a TBI, you may have, forgotten to show up somewhere. You may have started to develop personality changes, anger issues, things like that. And you can point to those incidents of misconduct as proof of a qualifying incident. And so we're going to talk through, at the end, we're going to talk through what it looks like, to file for a specific claim. But so that's the prong one. You're going to have to show the VA, hey, something happened in service, and then it led to a condition, which is the prong. Well, prong one also is non-qualifying disorders. So do know there are two things, and this ties in with CODs way too often. For example, if you are struggling with mental health issues in service, and you maybe get a mental health evaluation, oftentimes the VA may discharge you and might assign a personality disorder as your diagnosis. And the thing about this is personality disorders are, and a TBI, just to go back, a traumatic brain injury. So, again, that could be an IED blast. It could be a car accident. We've had clients who were strongly encouraged to be boxing entertainment for their unit and sustain TBIs or traumatic brain injuries that way as well. But in terms of, personality disorders, the military oftentimes uses this to mask mental health issues or other mental health diagnoses. So if you were discharged from the military with a personality disorder, it probably is not that. You probably have since been diagnosed with bipolar disorder, schizoaffective disorder, severe depression, bipolar. And so that is kind of the military's way to get you out easy and quickly, and you're no longer eligible for benefits. So this is something that you're going to have to overcome. And again, this is helpful when you have, if you have a doctor that you're working with, but just know they may tell you, hey, you're barred from benefits. You can't get any compensation for a personality disorder. It's still something you want to apply for if you believe that you actually have a different mental health disorder. And more often than not, that is the case. More often than not, the veterans do have another type of mental health disorder, and that is eligible for compensation. So don't let that bar you from pursuing the process. And so one thing that is going to help happen, because again, the 3 steps for applying for benefits, you have to show that something happened in service, an incident or an injury happened in service. You have to show that you have a current mental health or physical disability that's related to service. So prong 2 is showing that you do have a current diagnosed disability. And so for a lot of veterans, especially our clients, they don't have access to healthcare, right? Because you have a less than honorable discharge. And so now you can't, even go to the VA for healthcare. You don't have access to doctors. That's okay. Ideally, it is great if you are working with a doctor. It's great to work with that doctor, let them know you're applying for benefits, because they're going to know you a lot better than, an examiner. But there is always the option for you to go to a compensation and pension exam. So if you do apply for benefits and you don't have any, you don't have any medical evidence, you're not currently receiving treatment, you don't have access to that, the VA has a duty. If you raise, an issue and you're like, I believe that I have severe depression, and you submit a statement, they should send you to an exam. And this exam is going to just be with a independent contract doctor, medical professional. Oftentimes especially here in LA, you're going to be sent to QTC. You're going to get a letter from QTC to set you up for an appointment. It might also be an organization called MLSA, but more often than not, it is QTC. And this medical exam can really help you. I mean, these have been game changers for our COD cases. Because a lot of times, you know, the VA is going to read your statement or read what was going on in your life and not associate it with mental health. This is the key to associating it with mental health. This medical examiner is qualified to say, yeah, I believe that this misconduct was a result of bipolar disorder, was a result of a mental health disability. And that is a game changer when it comes to overcoming a COD. And so, you know, these truly can be some of the most important pieces of the process. And so the point is, when you go there, they're going to evaluate a couple things. They're going to evaluate you for any current disabilities. And then they're also going to determine whether or not that disability is related to service. So that's why a lot of times this exam meets prongs 2 and 3, because it'll determine your current diagnosis and whether or not it's related to whatever the qualifying incident was in service. And so it's really important when you go to these exams to be as open and honest about your time in service. And it can be so extremely tough to open up, especially this is a stranger, and this may be whatever happened to you, you may not have told anyone about it. And this might be your first time having to say it out loud. But most veterans, you know, this is the key to getting them to overcoming the COD, to getting them benefits. And so it really is important that you are, you know, as upfront and honest with that doctor as possible. One side note for these, it really is important to focus on your time in the service. Sometimes they'll ask about your childhood, about things like that. You know, and it's okay, obviously, to talk about it, but really the focus on this is your military service, and whether whatever happened in your military service affected your current, you know, your current disability. So, you know, they're going to ask you probably questions about growing up and what your experience was like. You know, and not that you should refuse to answer those questions, but do the best you can to just focus on whatever you need to talk about military related. Because, you know, if they spend all of their time getting information about what happened before the military, your chances of actually, you know, explaining or getting across to them how impactful your experience was in the military, and how it, you know, affected your life, it's going to get diminished and diminished. So really focus on your time in the service as opposed to anything else. And so there's, you know, we just talked about how tough the exams can be. There are ways to try to help this process, to try to make it less burdensome on yourself. And a lot of that's going to be with a personal statement. For some people, it is way easier to write it down on paper as opposed to saying it out loud. And that's okay. And if you can write it down and you can't say it, you can't talk about it, be honest with the doctor. Show up. In theory, they're supposed to review everything that you submit. To be safe, I would bring a copy with you. Bring a copy of your statement that goes into what happened in service. You know, if you were sexually assaulted and it is too difficult to talk about, but you can write it down, hand it to them, let them know, hey, this is really uncomfortable. I can't talk about it. I'm not ready to actually talk about it. Please read this statement. I wrote down what happened to me, and I'm not ready to share it out loud. Say that. You know, start the exam like that. You know, I will say a lot of doctors understand, and if they are a good examiner, they will take that into consideration and will respect that. You know, obviously not every examiner is a great examiner, but you know, that it is something, the more honest and forthcoming you are about it, the more likely there is going to be a good experience. So what this personal statement is going to focus on is you're going to be as honest as possible about what happened in service, why your current disability is related to your time in service, the symptoms you experience in service. So the types of symptoms, the severity, the frequency, and how they affect your daily life, including your ability to work. You want to, again, humanize your case as much as possible, so it's not just a number in the VA system. The best way to do that is with a personal statement. We talked about your records. Again, we went over this. You're going to want to get your records. You're going to want to go through them. You don't want to just rely on the VA. Sometimes you might have to, but it's best to get your own records, your own medical records. So if you go to the VA or DMH for treatment, get a copy of those records, go through them. If they're helpful, send them in. Okay. So I'm wrapping up here. Just a little bit more slides, but the other thing that's going to be most important is supporting documents. So you're going to want letters of support. So from family, friends, people you served with, if anyone that can attest to what happened in service because you were there, maybe you called home, told your sister, anyone that can attest to that, you're going to want them to write a letter of support to explain, like, hey, yeah, she called me when she was in boot camp. She told me this happened. And then the second part is if there's been any changes in your behavior. I was very close to my sister before she went to the military. We were inseparable. Once she got out, she was a completely different person. She was angry. She was cold. She was standoffish. She isolated herself. That's going to be important. That shows, hey, something happened that caused this change of behavior. And that's going to be important for the examiner to know. And maybe the most important document, if you can get it, is a letter from your doctor. If you have a good relationship with a therapist or a doctor and they are willing to write you a letter that says, I believe that this event in service has caused, depression or PTSD, that letter is going to be gold. So if you can, request a letter, talk to your doctor, and that doctor just needs to relate your current disability with something in service. And okay, so for appeals, you are going to want to, if you do get a decision, a denial, oftentimes with CODs, that's going to happen. Be prepared for that. Don't let it discourage you. You do have 1 year from the date of a decision to file an appeal. You have 3 options. You can do a supplemental claim. You must submit new and relevant evidence. That might be a new statement. It might be new medical records, but if you're going to do that, you need to include new and relevant evidence. If you don't have new evidence and you think the VA just made a mistake, you can do a higher level review. And that is basically a more experienced decision maker will look over your case, talk to you about it, and make another decision one way or another. That's typically the fastest approach in appealing. And the longest approach is the appeal to the BVA. But again, sometimes COD cases are really complicated. And so you might need to take it to the BVA. Just remember, you do have a 1 year from the date of the decision. And the reason that's important is because if you appeal within 1 year, you can get benefits. Your eligibility is going to continue. So, in the beginning video where it showed, the veteran get 80,000, there is very likely that there was appeals and there was an intent to file and then appeals, and it didn't get decided for a couple years, but they get all of that money while they were fighting the claim. So it's important to try to continue your eligibility from your very first claim. And I believe there is a question. What if the VA requests proof of a specific event that happened? How do you go about finding the date and the evidence of that event? That happens often. And so again, buddy statements can be helpful. More than often than not, it's been buddy statements, but also the good old internet. You can find, say you're on a ship, they will keep records of just what's happened on a ship. I have found you can go even in like just chat rooms, chat forums. There might be service members who are talking about that same event. And you can get in contact with them. Facebook, it really is, you're not limited to military records. So use the internet, get as much information as possible, and just try to submit what you have. And a buddy statement's always going to help seal that. And so I think, what is the BVA? The BVA is the Board of Veteran Appeals. And so, yeah, so that is going to be, you know, the next step when you're out of the regional office and actually working with attorneys. That's when you're going to go to the BVA. And I believe that is my time. Does anyone have any questions? We have maybe another minute or so. I can answer another couple questions. And I think there'll also be questions at the end, potentially, if you think about it and something comes up, you can ask questions at the end of this as well. I'm happy to hang around. Go ahead, Catherine. Maybe. Well, I'll stick around and I'll be happy to answer questions after Dionne presents as well.
All right, I just tried to ask Catherine to unmute. Is there a request to unmute? Okay, I'm sorry about that, Catherine. If you could just type in your question, or we can try again after Dionne's presentation. Well, thank you so much, Amanda, and to your team for the work you do for our veterans. It's amazing what Inner City Law Center's Vets team does on a regular basis. And wow, that was a lot of information. But rest assured that we will send out the recording to everybody who registered for this presentation early next week. And you can find this video now on Facebook or Meta World page right now. We're Facebook Live, and all of the of this information is streaming right now to a live audience. I will also drop the link to all of our social media pages in the chat for you guys to follow us, including for everything for Inner City Law Center, and also for a program called Homeful.LA, which promotes opportunities for people to volunteer, advocate, and donate towards ending homelessness. I'll also drop links to a special Amazon wish list that we have going on. We're doing in-kind donations for items for our veterans and for our Veterans Day fundraiser. Every contribution makes a huge difference. So now on to our next presenter. Yes, Chris, the recording will be emailed. I'm happy to introduce you all to Dionne Turner. He's a member of ICLC's policy team, and believe you me, I work very closely with them, and they work tirelessly to be at the table when issues around homelessness are being discussed at every level of government. So we're pleased to have you here, Dionne, to lead us in a conversation about housing units on the West LA VA campus. Dionne?
Hi, everybody. Good morning and happy Veterans Day. And thank you to all those that have served and are currently serving. I definitely appreciate you all. So, again, my name is Dionne Turner. I'm a public policy advocate on ICLC's policy team. And just want to give a quick shout out to my amazing team. We work, as Erin said, we do work tirelessly. And our goals on the policy team is to pretty much strategize comprehensive solutions aimed at ending homelessness, but also developing and driving a people-centered narrative. And we strongly believe that there is a substantial need to address the historical root causes of homelessness that have primarily been to the detriment of Black and Brown communities. And just connecting that to our veterans and our veterans experiencing homelessness today, I'll be focusing on the West LA VA campus, highlighting some historic issues that frame the current context of housing units and development units on the campus itself, and also how you can get involved in increasing public pressure on the VA to fulfill its housing and services promises. So with that ado, let me go ahead and share my screen so you all can see the presentation. Awesome. Aaron, is it showing the slideshow?
Yes, I can see it.
Okay, perfect. All right. So, I just want to take it back to 2011 and just really frame of the context of the VA, its current units, and why there has been such historic misuse for the West LA itself. So in 2011, Inner City Law Center, we filed Valentini versus Shinseki, and this was a class action lawsuit on behalf of thousands of veterans with severe disabilities in LA. And as a result of these disabilities, the plaintiffs became homeless and they could not access the medical and mental health treatment that they needed. So ICLC alleged the misuse of the VA campus in West LA because instead of providing the housing and services to veterans, the VA was leasing out the land for private use to Brentwood's private school, their athletic facilities, a laundry processing facility for nearby luxury hotels, UCLA's baseball stadiums and facilities, Fox Studios production, practice fields, for soccer tournaments, parking lots, and other external events, on the VA. And I should say that, the suit also challenges how, the 387 acre of the West LA VA campus, which was deeded to the US in roughly 1888 for the specific purpose of, providing a home for disabled veterans. And just the gross misuse, the gross context of having all these private facilities on the West LA VA campus that was supposed to house disabled heroes. Inner City Law Center did a great job in really leading the charge and leading the fight to ensure that the housing is provided and housing is built with proper services and needs for veterans experiencing homelessness specifically. So, in the VA settles the Valentini case and in turn adopts what's called a draft master plan. And this master plan that the current VA uses is guides and determines what's the most effective use for housing veterans on the West LA VA campus. And within that draft master plan, and I'll go into specifics just a little bit, give a little bit of an overview in the next slide, but it primarily envisioned a minimum of 1,200 units, 1,200 units of permanent supportive housing for homeless veterans and veterans that are at risk of experiencing homelessness. And as of today, 2021, of the 1,200 units promised, only 54 are currently available and occupied. The development actually stalled for a few years until nonprofits and external organizations got involved. And one of the primary proponents of the completion of the draft master plan is Vets Advocacy, which I'll introduce a little bit later and provide resources there. But currently 54 out of the 1,200, it's been 2016 to 2021, about 5 years in the making. Just the rate of housing being built is alarmingly slow. And what I want to highlight today is, the need to put pressure on the VA to fulfill its promises for these housing and services for our heroes. But what's in, this draft master plan? Well, here's a little bit of an overview. There's a provision of supportive housing on the campus, in the renovated existing buildings or newly constructed facilities. There's the need for emergency housing along with short-term treatment services on campus, to provide state-of-the-art primary care, mental health, addiction services. And, one of the things that was would really contribute to the draft master plan was a respect for individual veteran choices, whether to seek housing on the West LA VA or the local community. So really uplifting and empowering veterans to make their choice of what's best for them and what housing and services, are best for that individual. And along with integration of persons with disabilities, along with adhering to environmental and environmental preservation laws, environmental justice laws, regulations, such like that. So that's really just a 50,000 foot level view of the draft master plan. It gets really nuanced and very specific. Later on, I'll drop a link or along with other resources of that draft master plan should you be interested in seeing the actual specific points. So, along with the development, there is a stark need for advocacy and to become involved. So given the, VA's historic misuse of the campus and the alarmingly slow rate of development, which was again 54 out of 1,200 units, we need, as the public, as a society, veterans, advocates, civilians alike, to hold the VA accountable. And with that comes with the development of this master plan, right? To see it through its fruition, and to see it in its completion. And there's been continuous meetings with federal, state, local elected officials to provide information on how to support housing and related concerns. This year was pretty much a big year for veterans housing and services to be approved and appropriated by Congress. So in 2021, Congress passed numerous bills that really address combating veteran homelessness, and that also empowers the VA to support campus development and infrastructure in the West LA VA campus. So specifically, there was the West LA VA Campus Improvement Act of 2021. That itself, it provided connection of certain uses of leases and third-party agreements of land use to the West LA VA campus, and in turn exchange provide additional revenue for permanent supportive housing and services for veterans and those that are at risk. The American Rescue Plan Act of 2021 was this conglomerate $7 billion COVID relief funds towards veterans and construction of infrastructure at the national level, right? So the West LA VA campus would be allocated a chunk of that $7 billion of that American Rescue Plan Act of 2021. Ted Lieu had led an effort to provide an amendment in the National Defense Authorization Act, the NDAA, for the fiscal year 2022, in which additional revenues, right, from the VA and the West LA VA campus would be returned back to housing services and permanent supportive housing units. And even early October, Secretary McDonough visited the West LA VA campus, and upon his confirmation, the VA secretary himself had pledged that the West LA VA campus would be a priority, to see the fulfillment of the draft master plan, to see the fulfillment of these housing units being built for our heroes with the proper services and the proper facilities, along with community input. So in early October, Secretary McDonough visited the West LA VA campus and really became very optimistic of the draft master plan itself and the trajectory of the VA in terms of building. But we need to hold our leaders accountable, and that's why we developed this advocacy campaign to really highlight the fact that, yes, Secretary McDonough, you visited the West LA VA campus, but the work's not done yet. We need these housing to be built. We need community input from our veterans and our heroes, and as well as the local context. And we need our veterans to drive the narrative of how they want their housing to look like and what would best support our veterans. So there needs to be continued outreach to the veteran community to provide information about the status of the project, including hosting meetings and conducting town halls. Again, Veterans Advocacy is a nonprofit that really advocates for the West LA VA completion, and they've done an amazing job, an amazing work working with the veteran community, having these town halls, having these community plans, having these community meetings, so that way the community itself can provide input to the master plan. And with the master plan, the VA had promised to update its plans every 3 to 5 years. So it's currently up for renewal. And there's a revised draft master plan that just hasn't been released to the public yet. So Vets Advocacy is also extremely involved in having these community town halls, these town meetings, to really share with the VA of what these veterans want their community to look like, right? Not only just permanent supportive housing units, but recreational facilities, music halls, athletic centers, or recreational centers, right? So to really make the West LA VA campus a home. And again, so there's numerous ways that you all can get involved. And we've over the week, my colleagues and I have drafted an advocacy letter ready to be sent to the office of the secretary himself. So that way, the public can really provide that pressure net input of, look, we're watching, we see the alarming slow rate of 54 units out of 1,200, and we need to hold you accountable. we have this streamline of funding available appropriated by Congress. The momentum is in the favor of our heroes. Let's get this done. What are the barriers? How can we highlight these barriers? How can we strike down these barriers so our veterans can live in the communities that they deserve? But also social media too, right? Just tagging the Department of Veteran Affairs, highlighting the Westerla VA campus development, becoming vocal. These are all ways to really push the momentum. And as I just wanted to also point out that whenever we do advocate to such a behemoth of an agency, right, we have to take it with a critical eye, that the more pressure that we have, the better response that we'll get. So it's going to take, mobilization. It's going to take, a really mobilized effort to get that response and to, again, light the fire that's needed to see the master plan to completion. So I'm happy to answer any specific questions. Here are some advocacy resources that I can link to the chat, and for you all to get involved and for y'all to, really make this happen and to see the master plan to completion and get our veterans housed. Thank you all.
Yeah, there is a question in the chat. It says, what's the projected pace of U.S. vets new community development?
The projected pace of veterans new community development, I don't have that exact answer. I'm happy to connect, but again, veterans advocacy has had numerous town halls of this, and I'll provide the resource there if you wanted to get plugged in. But I know what's really striking now is this revised this revised master plan that's supposed to be updated, right? Again, the original master plan was written in 2016. It's in time for a complete renewal, a complete revision, and community input is going to be essential. So I know actually in September, Veterans Advocacy had a town hall specifically on the revised master plan, and that'll be a good connection to really figure out but what does the community want, what does the community needs, that way we can see this housing through. Aaron, are there any other questions that I can answer?
Yeah, I just saw something. Thank you, Dionne. I didn't see any questions at the moment. And thank you, Amanda, for replying to Caitlin's to answer. Did you want to unmute and speak to that?
Sure, I can do that. So let's see. One of the questions was, let me read it. So it looks like Caitlin asked, it seems like an attorney can provide limited representation, maybe draft a form and have the vet represent him or herself and then later step in for an appeal. Is that correct? And yes, that is correct. I would say, especially with COD cases, if you have access to an attorney or representative to be involved, it's definitely better. But at the very least, it is often that you might be able to meet with the attorney, get some counsel and advice, and file the initial claim. And then if it does need to go on appeal, and unfortunately, a lot of these cases, the VA handles wrong and do need to go on appeal, it is beneficial to have an attorney. One of the benefits I will say of having an attorney is that, or even a VSO, but typically with an attorney, if you have a representative, they might have access to your, it's called VBMS, and it's your VA online file. And so for my clients, while this stuff is pending, when I submit things, they go to an exam, I can pull up that exam. I can see it immediately. I can look at what the doctor wrote. I can see if there's any errors and I can attack them. I can try to get ahead of it. The pro se veteran doesn't have, that access to that, your VA file real time. And so that is one real benefit to have an attorney. And then it looks like Chris asked a question, how can I see who's been looking at my records on VBMS? So you can't. So only one representative has access to your records on VBMS at a time. So I'll have a lot of veterans, they might go talk to a VSO, sign a 2122A with them so they can help them just file something. That person, because they're listed as your representative, will have access. But the minute you sign on with someone else, that person will no longer have access. Only one person is going to have access to your VA claims file at a time. And then obviously the VA can see it and can go through it. And there will be a lot of people who are doing various things in the process of your claim, and you can, they'll all have access.
Thank you, Amanda. And thank you so much, Dionne. I see that Dionne is dropping some really useful links in the chat, including the master plan, some history, the campus development completion. Please click on those things. I believe that, the government is for the people and by the people. So we as the people have a responsibility to hold our elected officials and these agencies accountable. So we can't just, complain and sit back and do nothing. We definitely have to engage. And that includes letter writing, calling, and sometimes even showing up to community meetings. And if you ever need support, or if you're interested in doing something like that, please reach out to Inner City Law Center. We can guide you, provide talking points and everything for you in order to, be a strong advocate and just, go in, strong with the support of all the research and the time that's been put in by our policy and legal teams. I just wanted to kick it back to you, Dionne and Amanda, if you have any closing words, just to close us out today for our audience.
Yeah, I mean, I can say, at least going off of what I talked about specifically, don't give up, right? Getting one denial that's not the end all. And almost all of my clients, many have had many denials before I work with them, and ultimately do lead to a grant. And so it can be very wearing on you. And I recognize that, but oftentimes the benefits really are worth it. So, don't be too discouraged if you initially get a denial. There's always something else you can do. There's always something, you can appeal. So don't let one denial kind of, don't let it just end there.
And kind of just elaborating on Aaron's note, I think it's crucial that us as a people, that we hold our elected officials and our agencies accountable. If we don't, then who will? I do believe that, yes, these agencies do have the will of the people in mind, but it's going to take constant reminder. It's going to take a lot of pressure, right, to really extract and to really gain those resources and those fundings, because our agencies and our elected officials also are operating by limited in means capacities, right? And, a lot of the time self-interest drives those capacities and those fundings and those interests. So, us as a people collectivizing, mobilizing, for our veterans and for those serving, right, are giving us the ability to really be vocal and to really be outspoken and to be critical of our agencies and our elected officials. So to harness that and to use that right, to use that freedom, to really light the fire, is why I do this work, and it's why I'm in here. And, I love every single moment of it. So I challenge all of you, right, to really be vocal. I'm sure you all might have friends or partners or, really close loved ones that might have served or who are currently serving, and you would want to see them be treated, just as a family member or just as your friend would. So, we really need to be vocal and to really light the fire for, for the VA and to get this West LA VA campus built. So that's what I would love to see in West LA, and that being replicated all throughout the country. So this is good momentum, and happy to present. Again, feel free to connect. Happy to share more information. So thank you all for having me.
And with that, we can conclude, and I will sign us off by saying thank you so much for your service to all the veterans who are tuning in today and who will see this in the future. We really appreciate you, and we are here for you. So don't forget to reach out to Inner City Law Center to support you with any of these needs. Take care. and happy Veterans Day.